London, 1847. The grandfather clock in the drawing-room struck 11, its solemn chime echoing through the cavernous halls of Westmoreland House. Miss Beatrice Whitfield tucked her slender frame deeper into the window-seat alcove, where she had been quietly mending a torn lace collar by candlelight. The grand manor hummed with preparations for tomorrow's festivities, but no one noticed the governess working late into the evening. No one ever did. Miss Whitfield exists like a ghost in these halls, she had once overheard Lady Westmoreland tell a visitor. Perfectly invisible until needed. Invisible. The word had settled into Beatrice's bones over the years until she believed it defined her very essence. 28 years old, unmarried, and with no fortune or connections to recommend her, invisibility was her lot in life. She had accepted long ago that some women were meant to fade into the background of others' lives, their own dreams forever dormant. A door slammed somewhere in the east wing, followed by hurried footsteps. Beatrice quickly extinguished her candle. She had permission to use this quiet corner after the children were asleep, but Lord Westmoreland's house guests were arriving for tomorrow's grand ball, and she preferred avoiding awkward encounters that would only reinforce her insignificance. The footsteps grew louder. Two voices, male, engaged in heated conversation. Beatrice pressed herself further into the shadows of the alcove, clutching her mending to her chest. "For God's sake, Anthony, you cannot continue this way." The voice belonged to Lord Westmoreland. "Your father's legacy, my father's legacy, is precisely what I'm trying to escape." The second voice was deeper, laced with a bitterness that made Beatrice shiver. "I never asked for any of this. The Earl of Oakenhurst cannot simply abandon his responsibilities because he finds them distasteful." The footsteps halted just outside her alcove. Beatrice held her breath. "Tomorrow you will meet the eligible ladies I've invited expressly for your benefit," Lord Westmoreland continued. "Lady Caroline Hayward brings a considerable dowry that would restore what your father lost. A marriage of convenience." The Earl's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "How extraordinarily convenient for everyone but the bride and groom. Anthony, I bid you good night. Richard." A door opened and closed with finality, and silence descended once more. Beatrice exhaled slowly. The Earl of Oakenhurst, she had heard rumors of his return to society after years abroad. A reclusive nobleman with a reputation for eccentricity and a fortune diminished by his late father's gambling debts. Tomorrow he would be presented with eligible ladies of quality, while she would remain in the nursery with her young charges, out of sight as always. She gathered her mending and rose to leave when a shadow passed by the drawing-room doorway. Beatrice froze as the tall figure of a man entered, unaware of her presence. He moved to the decanter on the side table, pouring himself a generous measure of brandy before collapsing into a leather chair by the dying fire. The man ran a hand through his dark hair, his broad shoulders hunched beneath an elegantly tailored evening coat. From her hiding place, Beatrice could see his profile illuminated by the firelight, a strong jawline, straight nose, and eyes that appeared haunted even from a distance. She should announce herself immediately. Propriety demanded it. Yet something in his solitary dejection kept her silent, reluctant to disturb what was clearly a private moment of distress. "Damnable charade," he muttered to himself, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "A parade of fortune hunters and their ambitious mothers." Beatrice's foot slipped, knocking against the wooden panel. The man's head snapped up. "Who's there?" His voice cut through the darkness. She stepped forward, mortified. "Forgive me, my lord. I was just leaving." The man, undoubtedly the Earl of Oakenhurst, studied her with narrowed eyes. "And you are?" "Miss Whitfield, sir." "The governess." She cursed, keeping her eyes lowered. "Ah, the governess. A bitter smile crossed his face. Another invisible occupant of this household. The accuracy of his assessment startled her. I apologize for intruding. I often work here in the evenings when the children are asleep. No need for apologies, Miss Whitfield. He gestured to the chair opposite his. Unless you'd prefer to return to the shadows. It was an improper suggestion. A governess did not sit with noblemen in darkened drawing rooms after hours. Yet something in his tired eyes compelled her forward. I cannot stay, she said, even as she took a hesitant step closer. It would be inappropriate. More inappropriate than eavesdropping. There was no accusation in his tone, only wry amusement. I wasn't, Beatrice began, then stopped herself. Perhaps I was. Unexpectedly, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe features. Honesty. How refreshing. He studied her more carefully. You're not what I expected in a governess. And what did you expect, my lord? Someone older. Sterner. With spectacles perched on her nose and disapproval etched into her face. Beatrice felt a smile tug at her lips. I save my sternness for daylight hours, Lord Oakenhurst. His eyebrows rose. You know who I am? These walls have ears, sir. And your conversation with Lord Westmoreland was not exactly whispered. The Earl's expression darkened. Then you heard his plans for my matrimonial future. I heard enough to understand you do not welcome them. He drained his glass. Do you know what it's like, Miss Whitfield, to be valued only for your title? To know that beneath the courtesies and flattery, you are merely a means to an end. The question hung in the air between them. Beatrice thought of her own life, how her position defined her, how her value was measured by her usefulness to others. I imagine it feels much like being invisible until someone requires your services. Their eyes met across the dim room, a moment of unexpected understanding passing between them. Precisely, he said quietly. We are not so different, you and I. Except for the minor details of title, wealth, and social standing, Beatrice replied, unable to keep the dryness from her tone. Lord Oakenhurst chuckled. Those are merely accidents of birth, Miss Whitfield. He leaned forward, his eyes intent on hers. Tell me, if you were not a governess, what would you be? The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked about her aspirations before. I would be a writer, perhaps. Of poetry. You write poetry. His interest seemed genuine. I did once. Now I have little time for such indulgences. A pity. The world needs more poetry and fewer social conventions. He refilled his glass. And what would you write about, Miss Whitfield, if convention did not constrain you? Truth, she answered without hesitation. The truth behind the masks we all wear. The grandfather clock struck midnight, startling them both from the unexpected intimacy of their conversation. I really must go, Beatrice said, rising quickly. Wait. The Earl stood too, towering over her slight frame. I've enjoyed our conversation more than any I've had since returning to England. You've had too much brandy, my lord. Perhaps. But brandy reveals truths that sobriety conceals. He took a step closer. Will you be at the ball tomorrow? Governesses do not attend balls, Beatrice reminded him. I shall be in the nursery, where I belong. Where society has placed you, you mean? His eyes searched hers. What if I requested your presence? It would cause a scandal, she replied, though her heart quickened at the thought. And you already have enough of those to contend with, according to the gossip. He smiled ruefully. You've heard those rumours too, then? I hear everything, Lord Oakenhurst. That's the advantage of being invisible. You're not invisible to me, Miss Whitfield. His words were soft but intense. Not anymore. With that declaration hanging between them, Beatrice fled the drawing-room, her heart pounding with emotion she dared not name. The following day passed in a flurry of activity. The children were excitable, sensing the festive atmosphere that had overtaken the household. Beatrice kept them occupied with lessons and games, all while her mind continually returned to her midnight encounter with the Earl. Miss Whitfield, you're not listening, 8-year-old Lady Charlotte complained as she recited her French verbs. Forgive me, my dear. Beatrice forced her attention back to her pupil. Please continue. By evening, the mansion was transformed. Chandeliers blazed with hundreds of candles, footmen in livery stood at attention, and the string quartet tuned their instruments in the ballroom. From the nursery windows, Beatrice watched carriages arrive, depositing elegantly dressed guests at the front entrance. She had just settled the children for the night when a maid appeared with a package. For you, Miss Whitfield, the girl said, curtsying. Inside the box lay a gown of midnight blue silk, simple yet exquisite, with a note in a bold masculine hand, truth requires courage. Midnight in the library. Beatrice stared at the gown, her hands trembling. This was madness. Complete, utter madness. And yet... The clock struck 11 as she slipped through the servants' stairs, the borrowed gown rustling softly. She had arranged her hair simply, with no ornament save a blue ribbon that matched the dress. The few servants she passed barely glanced at her, assuming she was one of the lesser guests making her way back from the ladies' withdrawing room. The library was empty when she arrived, its vast shelves of leather-bound books dimly lit by a single lamp. Beatrice moved to the window, watching the dancers through the partially open curtains. She could see Lord Oakenhurst, his tall figure unmistakable among the revellers. He danced with a beautiful blonde woman who gazed up at him adoringly. She's the daughter of a duke, came a voice from behind her. Impeccable bloodlines, substantial dowry, and absolutely no conversation beyond the weather and fashion. Beatrice turned to find the Earl closing the library door behind him. He was resplendent in formal evening attire, his cravat perfectly tied, his dark hair slightly tousled as if he had repeatedly run his hand through it in frustration. You shouldn't have sent the gown, she said quietly. Yet you wore it. He approached slowly, his eyes taking in her transformation. It suits you. Why am I here, Lord Oakenhurst? Because I needed to see someone real amidst all this artifice. He gestured toward the ballroom. And because I haven't been able to stop thinking about our conversation. One conversation hardly constitutes a connection. Doesn't it? I've spoken with 24 ladies tonight and not one of them spoke a single honest word. He moved closer. You showed me more of yourself in 5 minutes than they have in hours of rehearsed pleasantries. That's because I have nothing to gain from you, my lord. No title to secure, no fortune to chase. Anthony, he corrected. My name is Anthony. It would be highly improper for me to. Propriety is what brought me to the brink of ruin in the first place, he interrupted, bitterness edging his voice. Do you know why I left England 5 years ago, Miss Whitfield? She shook her head. I discovered my fiancée, a match arranged by my father to merge our estates with her family's fortune, had been carrying on an affair with my own cousin. His jaw tightened at the memory. When confronted, she admitted she had never loved me, only my title and prospects. My cousin, meanwhile, had gambled away his inheritance and saw her as his path to financial salvation. I'm sorry, Beatrice said softly. I fled to the continent rather than face the scandal. While there, I learned my father had been gambling away our family's fortune for years. He died in my absence, leaving me a title with little means to support it. Antony's eyes met hers. Now I'm expected to repeat the same pattern, marry for advantage rather than affection. And you brought me here to, what? Sympathize? I brought you here because in one midnight conversation, you showed more character than all the eligible ladies in that ballroom combined. He took her hand, his touch sending an unexpected warmth through her. Tell me about yourself. The truth, not the polite version. Beatrice hesitated, then found herself speaking. My father was a country vicar. When he died, my mother and I were left with nothing. She found work as a housekeeper, and I was sent to school on charity. I learned that a woman without fortune must make herself useful or perish. She looked down at their joined hands. I became a governess because it was that, or become a companion to some demanding dowager. At least with children, there is honesty. And your poetry. A sad smile crossed her face. Dreams don't put food on the table, my lord. Antony, he reminded her gently. Antony, she conceded, the intimacy of his name on her lips sending a thrill through her. The clock began to strike midnight. From the ballroom came the sounds of laughter and music. I should return to the nursery, Beatrice said, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. Will you meet me again? Antony asked. Tomorrow night, in the gardens. Prudence demanded refusal. Yet something deeper, a part of herself long buried beneath duty and propriety, urged her to accept. Yes, she whispered, then slipped away before courage abandoned her. Their clandestine meetings continued over the following week. Each night, after the household retired, they would meet in the gardens or the library, talking until the early hours. Antony spoke of his travels, his dreams of restoring his family's estate not through marriage but through investments in the new railways. Beatrice shared her poetry, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as he responded with genuine admiration. You have a gift, he told her one night as they sat in the conservatory, moonlight streaming through the glass ceiling. Your words capture truths others are afraid to acknowledge. Truth has little value in our world, she replied. We are all playing roles assigned to us by birth and circumstance. Not all of us accept those roles. Antony's fingers brushed hers where they rested on the stone bench. I've made a decision, Beatrice. The use of her Christian name, which had gradually replaced formality during their meetings, still sent a pleasant shock through her. I'm returning to Oakenhurst tomorrow, he continued. I've declined Lord Westmoreland's matchmaking efforts and all the invitations that followed. Disappointment washed over her. I see. No, you don't. He took both her hands in his. I want you to come with me. As what? She asked, her voice barely audible. As my wife. Beatrice pulled her hands away, rising from the bench. You cannot be serious. I have never been more serious about anything in my life. You're an earl. I'm a governess. Titles mean nothing without happiness, Antony said, standing to face her. In the past week, you've shown me what it means to be truly seen for oneself. Do you not feel the same? What I feel doesn't matter, she replied, though her heart ached with unspoken longing. Society would never accept such a match. Your reputation, hang my reputation. It's already in tatters. He stepped closer. Beatrice, I love you. Not for your connections or your dowry, but for your mind, your spirit, your truth. Love? The word felt foreign on her tongue. You can't possibly, why not? Because we've only known each other a week? Some souls recognize each other instantly, while others spend lifetimes as strangers despite years together. Your family would disown you, she protested weakly. I have no family left to disown me. And I would rather build a new legacy with you than perpetuate the hollow one I inherited. Hope, dangerous, forbidden hope, bloomed in Beatrice's chest. Yet years of accepting her invisibility had ingrained caution too deeply to be overcome by a single declaration, however passionate. I need time, she whispered. This is too sudden. Disappointment flashed across his features, quickly masked. Of course. Forgive my impetuosity. He stepped back. I leave tomorrow at noon. Should you change your mind, I'll wait for you at the crossroads beyond the village until 1 o'clock. He pressed a gentle kiss to her hand, then was gone, leaving Beatrice alone with a heart both soaring and terrified. Morning brought chaos to Westmoreland House. The Earl of Oakenhurst's abrupt departure was the sole topic of conversation among the servants and family alike. Rumours swirled. He had quarrelled with Lord Westmoreland, he had received devastating news from his estate, he had been caught in a compromising position with Lady someone or other. No one noticed the governess's distraction as she mechanically supervised her charges through their lessons. No one saw how her eyes repeatedly drifted to the clock, watching the minutes tick toward noon. At 11:30, Lady Westmoreland summoned Beatrice to her private sitting room. The Countess sat rigidly, a letter in her hand, her expression thunderous. Miss Whitfield, are you acquainted with the Earl of Oakenhurst? The question sent ice through Beatrice's veins. I have been introduced to his lordship. Introduced? Lady Westmoreland's eyebrows rose dangerously. According to this letter, delivered to me not an hour ago, you have been engaged in clandestine meetings with him throughout his stay. Beatrice's mouth went dry. My lady, do not insult me with denials. The Countess rose, her silk gown rustling ominously. Lord Oakenhurst has had the audacity to inform me that he intends to marry you. You, a penniless governess with no connections. Can you imagine the scandal? The room seemed to tilt beneath Beatrice's feet. He wrote to you of his intentions. He did indeed. A more offensive letter I have never received. Lady Westmoreland thrust the paper at her. Read it yourself, if you doubt me. With trembling fingers, Beatrice accepted the letter. Antony's bold handwriting leapt from the page. Lady Westmoreland, I write to inform you that I have asked Miss Beatrice Whitfield to become my wife. Though she has not yet given me her answer, I wish to make my intentions clear to prevent any misunderstanding should she accept. Miss Whitfield possesses qualities of character and intellect far more valuable than fortune or connections. I am well aware that our match will provoke comment, perhaps even scandal. I accept this consequence gladly, for I have learned that true happiness cannot be found in meeting society's expectations, only in honoring one's own heart. Should Miss Whitfield consent to become the Countess of Oakenhurst, I trust you will show her the respect her new position commands, regardless of your personal feelings on the matter. Your servant. Anthony Oakenhurst's tears pricked at Beatrice's eyes. He had publicly declared his intentions, risking ridicule and censure for her sake. No one in her life had ever fought for her thus. What have you to say for yourself? Lady Westmoreland demanded. Beatrice carefully refolded the letter, her decision crystallizing in that moment. Only that I am grateful for your employment, my lady, and that I hereby tender my resignation. Your resignation? The Countess appeared genuinely shocked. Yes, madam. Effective immediately. Beatrice curtsied. I believe there is someone waiting for me. She turned and walked from the room, deaf to Lady Westmoreland's sputtered protests. In her small attic chamber, she hastily packed her few belongings, changed into her travelling dress, and wrote a brief, affectionate note to her young charges. The grandfather clock struck noon as she descended the servants' stairs. By past, she had walked through the village, her heart pounding with every step. As the crossroads came into view, she saw a solitary figure standing beside a carriage, waiting, hoping, perhaps beginning to doubt. Anthony turned at the sound of her footsteps, his face transforming with joy when he saw her. Without a word, he strode forward and enfolded her in his arms. "You came," he whispered against her hair. "You wrote to Lady Westmoreland," she countered, pulling back to search his face. "I wanted to do things properly." His smile was both sheepish and defiant. Was she very angry? Livid, Beatrice confirmed, finding herself smiling despite everything. "I've resigned my position." Hope blazed in his eyes. "Does that mean—" "Yes," she interrupted, newfound courage making her bold. "Yes, Anthony, I will marry you." He lifted her off her feet in his exuberance, spinning her in a circle that left them both laughing. When he set her down, his expression grew serious. "It won't be easy," he warned. "Society will talk. Some doors will close to us. Let them talk." "Let the doors close," Beatrice replied, her voice steady with certainty. "I've spent my life being invisible, Anthony. With you, I am finally seen. Not just seen, Beatrice. Loved." He cupped her face gently. "Utterly, completely loved for exactly who you are." As his lips met hers in a kiss that promised a lifetime of truth and passion, Beatrice felt the last chains of her false belief fall away. She was no longer invisible, no longer merely useful, no longer defined by her station. She was loved. And in that love, she had found her truest self at last. 18 months later, the Gazette Society pages reported, "The Earl and Countess of Oakenhurst welcomed distinguished guests to the reopening of Oakenhurst Hall following extensive renovations." The Countess, formerly Miss Beatrice Whitfield, has become known in literary circles for her recently published volume of poetry, Invisible No More, which has received considerable acclaim. The Earl's investments in railway development have reportedly restored the family fortunes, proving that unconventional choices in both marriage and business can indeed lead to prosperity. Those who predicted disaster when the Earl married his children's governess must now acknowledge their error, as the couple's obvious devotion has silenced even the most vicious gossips. As Lady M. was overheard remarking, "Love, it seems, may be the most practical investment of all."